In this tutorial, I'm gonna show you how to make negative painting using the watercolor brushes. I'm gonna open a new layer, and first of all, what I'm gonna tell you what it is negative painting. Negative painting, it is just when you're doing a design, you would color it like from the inside. Negative painting, it is basically the opposite. When you make a design, you color everything around it. So following this principle, that means that when I make, for example, a tree, imagine that that's the top and that's the trunk and the floor, I wouldn't be color all the inside of the tree, but the outside, okay? With watercolors, because the paint is not that opaque, that means that you will see through all the different trees, and that will create some depth in the illustration. Obviously this tree, it is very simple and not great, but I'll show you what are we gonna do next. For this design, first of all, open the texture paper of the watercolor texture paper and just create a layer underneath. Think about what colors are you gonna use for the illustration. And for example, I'm gonna go with the neutrals colors included within the pack. When you have your colors, we're gonna start using the light one, and then we're gonna go darker and darker each time. We're gonna create a new layer. Here you can see my old designs. And I'm gonna just take any brush. I'm gonna go to the watercolor brushes, and I'm gonna just take one very opaque brush, like for example the liner, that is quite opaque. And I'm gonna start creating my design. I'm gonna start drawing from the front. So imagine that you're doing a forest. So you will do the tree that it would be closer to you. And remember that now we are coloring same as usual. We are not coloring outside, but you will see how does it work in the future. Just keep playing, creating your design. Okay, I have my first tree, and I'm gonna think about the trees that they're gonna go in the second layer. Imagine as a collage, okay? Gonna create a new layer on top, okay? Then we're gonna move underneath. I'm gonna select the next color. That is gonna be this green. You know something? I actually want my illustration to be a little bit more spooky, so I'm gonna lower the saturation so it looks a little bit less vibrant. And I'm gonna do my second layer. Remember, because this tree is gonna give the feeling that it's at the back, I'm gonna try to be thinner and smaller. When you do branches, I like to start it from the part closer to a tree that is thicker, and then they go thinner and thinner. Okay, I have my second layer. Let's go to the next one. Layer, and move it to the bottom, and I'm gonna select a darker color. I'll start it with the floor. Okay, I'm gonna create my fourth layer, and just a darker color, and the same. I have all my layers now grouped together, and what I'm going to do, I'm gonna hide it. I'm gonna create a new layer, and that's gonna be the real illustration. I'm gonna select a very light color that you like. I'm gonna still using like a green colors, and I'm gonna select the wash texture. And I'm gonna just paint, like give a quick wash to my canvas. If you want, you can also use any of the salties to create like a little bit more detail, just any interesting texture. Get the first tree, the one that is gonna be probably at the top, and tap and select. As you can see here, you have select all the areas, and as you can see, the way that Procreate works, it is you just can paint inside of the tree. However, because this is a negative painting, we want to paint all in the background, not in the tree, okay? So we are gonna click invert. Also, because normally watercolors, the edges, they are not perfect, we're gonna click in feather, and we're gonna just tap in amount 3. Around 3, 4, 5. We're gonna create a new layer right on top of first one. Select a color that you like, a little bit darker. Maybe with any of the washes. I'm gonna use now the wash grunge edges. I'm gonna just paint around. And that's the way it looks. Gonna just unselect, and we have our first tree. We're gonna create the next one now, exactly the same. Create a new layer on top. And now look, the only difference it is, we have drawn this tree, okay? We're gonna go with the second one, but when you do these ones, okay, we want to select all the background from the first one, tree, and the second layer. So I'm gonna merge them. You can pinch your fingers or you just can't merge. Remember that for merge, you need to have selected both layers. They need to be visible. So I'm gonna merge, and now you just can make them disappear. And we start the same process. Tap, select, invert, feather, 2%, 2 or 3%. We go to a new layer. We are gonna get a darker color and just paint. The darker color you use, the more different they are, the most noticeable all these trees they would be. Just tap again, and that's how they're looking. We do the same. We're gonna create a new layer on top, and now we want to match the layer that we just did with the bottom one. We need to show them, otherwise they won't match. Match down. I'm gonna hide it now, I don't need it anymore. And select, invert, feather, 2% or 3%. And now I'm gonna go to my new layer, just selecting a darker color. I might even move them to blue a little bit and just paint on top everything. We're gonna do the last one. New layer on top, exactly the same. I'm gonna open all our reference trees and I'm gonna merge them all. Remember, when you merge them, make them visible, otherwise it won't work. Merge, we'll hide them, select, invert, feather, just a couple. And let's go to the new layer. And I'm gonna make it even more blue, just even a darker color, and just paint everything. And there we go. We have our main design here, but for example, I've just noticed here there is some mistakes. Well, no mistakes, just like as you can see through, but that's have an easy fix. What I'm going to do, for example, is just with the rubber, I'm gonna start rubbing down all of these parts that I didn't fill it up well before. I'm gonna go through all the layers. Something else that you can do, it is, obviously now, like the layers, they have like full opacity, but you can play around and see if any of the opacities, what they do. Normally, for this specific style, I just leave them normal, maybe multiply. But something else that I quite like to do, something like as a paper cut effect, which is just, for example, I'm gonna start in my main one, okay? If I like to add like maybe a little shadow behind all these three, And that is very simple. All you have to do is just create a clipping mask on top. For this, I like very soft brushes. I'm gonna go with the subtle cotton edges. Quite dark color, although we might lower the opacity later. And right on top, you just can go, just can go behind this tree and just create some shadows like that. Obviously it's too obvious now, but I will put, in that case, maybe multiply, or I like color blend because it just pop up, make them more colorful, and I will just lower the opacity. So you can still, if you still see it is too obvious, you can always go to Gaussian blur, blend the shadow even a bit more. I'm gonna follow this process and do it again in every single layer, okay? So clipping mask, not this one. So new layer, clipping mask, and with the subtle cotton edges, I'm gonna go through just in the edges. Now that I'm ready, same, I'm gonna type color blend, lower the opacity, and I'm gonna add some Gaussian blur. So that's it. The last thing that you can do, it is to just group everything together. You don't need this layer anymore, so you can just delete it. And look, just to create this watercolor effect of the border, just make sure that everything it is grouped together, and just in the transformation tool, just make the size a little bit smaller, creating some edges to just make it even more watercolor style. And there we go. Following this same method, you can do a lot of different design, as for example with flowers, with stamp brushes, and the other result, they are very, very cute and original.